Why wait to earn the degree you deserve? You have the experience, you have the knowledge. Now's the time to get the credit for the work you've done and earn the recognition you deserve by starting your comeback at Purdue Global. It's time to earn a degree you'll be proud of, a degree that employers will respect. It's never too late. Never too late to come back stronger and move forward in your career. Start your comeback today at purdueglobal.edu. Purdue's online university for working adults.
Hey, Diane. Holiday shopping?
All done. Everyone's getting the new iPhone 15 from T-Mobile, and T-Mobile's covering the cost. Plus, I got 4 lines for $25 a line per month.
I gotta get to T-Mobile.
Get 4 iPhone 15s on us with eligible trade-in when you switch to T-Mobile.
Minimum of 4 lines for $25 per line per month with autopay discount using debit or bank account. $5 more per line without autopay, plus taxes and fees. Phone fee at 24 monthly bill credits for well-qualified customers. Contact us before canceling account to continue bill credits or credit stop and balance on required finance agreement due. $35 per line connection charge apply. See T-Mobile.com.
So you're saying with Hilton Honors, I can use points for a free night stay anywhere?
Anywhere.
What about fancy places like the Canopy in Paris?
Yeah, Hilton Honors, baby.
Or relaxing sanctuaries like the Conrad in Tulum?
Hilton Honors, baby.
Ooh, what about the 5-star Waldorf Astoria in the Maldives?
Are you gonna do this for all 7,000 hotels and resorts?
When you want points that can take you anywhere, it matters where you stay. Hilton for the stay.
Click the banner to join Hilton Honors for free today.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, sponsored by Soundring. Visit jabberjawmedia.com for more shows like this one.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, ever present to bring you an insightful, inspiring, interesting, engaging conversation with people who are creating awesome stuff within the independent music/art world. And the guest this week is Mr. Phil Jamieson, or Jamieson. Of course, why would I be professional and ask how he pronounces his last name? I don't know why. I just feel I either forget or I feel awkward asking, but instead, then I'll butcher their name in the intro. So there we go. But Phil Jamieson, or Jamieson, from Caspian, a band from the Boston area who has existed for quite some time, is quite prolific as well. They've got a lot of records underneath their belt, a lot of EPs, even a live record. And I just remember discovering them and falling in love with them immediately. They definitely fall into the sort of, post-rock genre, which we discuss at length in the interview, because, maybe that's not the most accurate portrayal of the band, but a really, really hardworking, and you could tell that the band is kind of reaching sort of a creative renaissance with not only their last couple records, but more people are coming out to their shows, and it's just exciting to feel like a band who has been working for so long, for so hard, is finally receiving that, that recognition that, they understandably aren't craving, but, when they get it, it's like, hey, that's great. And that's my conjecture. Maybe they obviously want to be as big as like U2. But, anyways, I digress, but I'm very excited to bring this conversation with Phil. But I want to get through some business things and some other items of importance for me to share with you. First of all, there's been a lot of feedback recently on the show from people emailing me, leaving nice reviews on iTunes, and I really, really appreciate that because, I'm putting myself out here in some respects, and, some people beat up on me where they're like, hey, dum-dum, how about you just let the interviewer talk, or how about you don't make these intros, and, I get it. But, ultimately, this is my show, and if you don't like it, that's fine. Please don't listen to it, or maybe just fast forward this, 5 to 8 minute preamble and just listen to the interview. That's fine. If you do that, I obviously don't care, and plus I don't know. Or actually, maybe I do. Maybe I just track all of your phones. Maybe I'm like, Big Brother is watching, but no, I'm not. But anyways, thank you very much for the people who do feel the extra effort to go above and, like I said, write me or leave a nice review. I really do appreciate that. So I'm going to focus on 2 negative things, and then I'll kind of close it out on 2 positive things. But I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Paris attacks. Most of you have obviously heard at this point. There was a huge terrorist attack on, I want to say it was November 13th. I could be completely wrong on the date. But it was horrific. And what is even more, I guess, I don't know if I call it bizarre, but it affected the independent music world as well. Because there was an attack on a music venue. And so just imagine yourself going to a concert or a show and then having 80 people die around you. Because I think that was the final toll. I'm just going off the top of my head, not doing the research, but it's horrible. And one of them was the merchandise manager for the band Eagles of Death Metal, and it's just so sad. And everybody that was affected from that, from either people like myself who are just literally consuming the media and being like, oh my gosh, this is horrific, to anybody it has affected on a deep level. I'm so sorry. I have no other words. And like I said, just because it has affected our community, not only from an independent music perspective, but just humanity in general. Just hold your loved ones that much closer and realize that our time on this weird planet, regardless of what you believe, is so bizarre. We have so many different experiences, and then when you see this, this humanity just pointed right back at you, that you could be taken off this mortal coil, as they say, so quickly. It just, it makes you kind of appreciate the finer things in life a little bit more, and that's what it made me do. So, and on another somber note as well, is a previous guest of the show. His name is Jonathan Vigil. He sings for a band called The Ghost Inside. I've known him forever. His band got in a very, very severe bus accident. News is still coming out as I'm recording this. I know that all of the band members have survived. Unfortunately, the driver of their bus did not, and the person who hit them in the semi-truck did not survive. So you just hate to hear these stories because, you see them happen a decent amount, unfortunately, where bands, because they spend so much time on the road, they're just statistically speaking, there will be accidents. And I just really, really hope that obviously all of the members, they are alive. Some of them are in critical condition, but that they will pull out and then be able to, just reevaluate where their priorities are and be able to move forward and hopefully be creating music soon again, because ultimately that's why they were doing it out there on the road to begin with. So my deepest, sincere, heartfelt outpouring of emotions goes to everybody who's been affected by that as well. Just because it's it affected me deeply because I've known, like I said, Jonathan the singer, or Vigil as most people know him, for quite some time, and he's always been a great person to me. So it just makes me sad when I read about that stuff. So anyways, like I said, shifting to a more positive note, I wanted to talk to you about a thing that this show is a part of called the Jabberjaw Media Network, or not even that, but Jabberjaw Media. So visit that website, jabberjawmedia.com. And you'll be able to find out about all of the other amazing shows that we are now connected to as a sort of mothership. But I wanted to, over the course of the next couple of weeks, I wanted to highlight some of these shows in particular. And one of them is from my good friend Tom Mullen, who does a podcast called Washed Up Emo. Now, those of you are probably familiar because you had maybe listened to an episode that Tom and I did maybe about 2 months or so ago. And it was a great conversation. But Tom focuses on the amazing genre of emo, and focuses on the mid to late 90s, and then also kind of talks about when that word got kind of co-opted and put to a whole different meaning, but then also focuses it on the sort of resurgence of that style of music over the past 5 to 8 years. He just does incredible work, and it's really fun. And I suggest that you take out that time because he's not putting out episodes on the daily. He's putting them like maybe once or twice a month. So I think you'll have the time to be able to consume that. So visit jabberjawmedia.com and then listen to the Wash Up Emo podcast. I love Tom and I love his show. So yay. And one last thing before we dove into my preamble about Phil is that I get a lot of emails in regards to how do you record your podcast? How do you get your stuff on iTunes? And the simplest thing that I tell people, like I've been involved with this service and I've been doing the show for, close to 4 years now. I lose track of the timing, but the most prevailing thing that has stayed the same ever since I started to record podcasts back in 2010 was a company, and the company is called Buzzsprout. So there's a million options out there in regards to how you can host your podcast, how you can get it on iTunes, and how you can get it out to the world. Buzzsprout to me is just so simple, easy, amazing to deal with, very low cost. And the thing that I like the most about them is, they have an embedded player that you can post on any website. But the thing I like the most is the fact that they don't charge. There's no sliding scale on charges. So it's like if you want to put out 4 hours of audio a month, they're going to charge you X amount of dollars, regardless of how many downloads you get. So you could get 100 downloads, you can get 100,000 downloads, and they're not going to be like, oh, we got to charge you more because there's more bandwidth. So they keep that cost very low, don't pass it along to you, and it's an incredible service. So if you are interested in starting a podcast, I suggest you go to buzzsprout.com/50, the number 50, and then you'll be able to get half off of your first month. It's incredible. So do that because, like I said, I love the company. I've been with them since day one of my I was going to say podcasting career, whatever that means. But I've been with them since day one, and I love their service. So yes, visit buzzsprout.com/50 and jump on it. It's a great deal. So Phil from Caspian, great conversation. Just loved the dude from like 10 minutes into it. I could tell he was really engaged. He was excited to do the show, and I love to speak with people who love this sort of long-form format. And great story. Just check out Caspian. Like, if you like intricate guitar music that creates a very wide palette in which you can either be contemplative, you can either be really engaged, or you can just simply listen to his background noise. Like, it runs the gamut, and that's why I love a band like Caspian, because they're so versatile, and it's awesome. So here's my discussion with Phil. Listen to Caspian, and I'll talk to you after the break. I remember, I think it was right around, I would say mid-2000s, I just became obsessed with the notion and idea of, like post-rock, whatever that may be. So it's just like, I got keyed into Explosions in the Sky, Mono, all that sort of stuff, because I was really, really into ISIS, and so I started to, explore other avenues. And then I remember a friend of mine told me to listen to you guys, and he was like, yeah, basically it's kind of like hardcore kids getting super experimental.
Right on. I can get with that. That's cool.
Which I was like, oh, like I'll check this out. Do you think that's kind of a obviously it sounds like you're agreeing with me. Do you think that was an accurate representation of kind of what you guys were birthed?
It's funny. I mean, we did get that a lot in the early days, and it's weird because like none of us were coming from any kind of hardcore background at all. Like we all appreciated some hardcore records, but all the music that we were involved in creating prior to Caspian was kind of, it was definitely a bit on the lighter side. Cal was doing a lot of like folky kind of stuff and getting into loop pedals. I was in a sort of like a indie alternative band that was sort of like Pedro the Lion meets Pearl Jam or something. And Joe was just like straight up into like techno. He was in a band that was just like doing live sort of New Deal, Daft Punky kind of stuff before it was popularized, I guess. And so none of us were coming from that pedigree, but we did get that. And I think, we always had a desire to do heavy music from day one. And we all certainly, were raised on some heavier stuff. But none of us, we didn't come into the band with like jean jackets with pins and Vans and stuff. You know what I mean? It was more just like we were a bunch of sensitive, emotional post-college kids. And then we discovered post-rock, maybe a little bit. I discovered post-rock in 2002. And then, it was off to the races with that,
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, that's cool. I always, I like when people, describing all of your music tastes like that. It's just, it's always funny because that's usually how bands that, I guess, last longer form, where it's like, it isn't just like one kind of typical person. You're just kind of like, oh, well, like this guy is like, I know him and he plays guitar. He's not necessarily into the same stuff as me, but I guess we can kind of play together and see if it works.
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much it, dude, for sure.
It's like out of necessity to find players rather than like function, where it's like, all right, I need to find a guy that's like super into Minor Threat so he can emulate them.
Yeah, it wasn't like a posting on Craigslist or like a, grab a phone number at the practice space from something hanging on the wall kind of thing. There was definitely friendships established, and we were just all kind of birds of a feather. Like the college we went to was a little bit smaller. I think there were maybe 130, 140 people in our sort of small liberal arts school. So everyone kind of knew each other, and you knew who the musicians were, and you knew who, like the sports dudes were, and everyone kind of got along and were friends. And it was really kind of different than high school. It was just a really nice sort of open, friendly, social thing. And we all knew each other from that. That sort of established the connection. And yeah, one thing led to another. Longer story, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I like you describing that experience because I went to like a small Lutheran high school, and I think my entire high school was like 700 people. So this was like, it was small comparatively speaking to other schools. And the experience you just spoke about is exactly what I had as well. And I love.
Nice,
it's like,
right?
Yeah, it's so great because, even though, like you mentioned, there are people with differing interests, you kind of all, like, you had your corner and you respected it. You didn't have this, like, us versus them mentality.
Yeah, I feel like at Gordon, where we went, I mean, the general vibe just kind of felt like everyone kind of got that out of their system in high school. There's a lot of people coming from public schools, myself included. And, my high school was your classic Massachusetts, North Shore, Tri-Town, lots of factions, lots of different like in crowds and out crowds, and there were the geeks, and it's just like a kind of like that the 80s movie where it's like, oh, that's the nerd, like that's the jock, and they all acted sort of according to the archetypes, you know what I mean? And I just sort of, I didn't really, I've always been kind of, I guess, like a super shy person, and high school was sort of a time in life where I just was very withdrawn. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't go to prom. I didn't have like, a massive circle of friends. I kind of just kept to myself and like listened to Led Zeppelin and went camping. That's like all I did in high school, man, like straight up.
Sure.
I picked up a guitar freshman year of high school after watching like a Led Zeppelin tape, a VHS tape, and I was like, I think I want to do that. And I just sort of withdrew from the outside world and just sort of sat in my basement and set up a mirror and watched myself play the guitar in the mirror every night, pretty vain. And then like, just wasn't really tapped in, I guess, to like the classic American high school ethos, so to speak. It was a little bit, I don't know, there was something that was just kind of unapproachable and a little scary about it to me. I was always afraid of being judged and all that, emo sensitive shit. But like college came around, and like I said, it kind of felt like maybe some of the other folks at that school were coming from the same place. And like I said, we got it out of the system, and everyone was just like, let's just hang out and enjoy this and kick it. And it was really, for me, it was a really wonderful sort of social explosion. It's like, oh, I can date a girl. This is really cool. Like we can kiss. How about that?
Totally.
It's like, oh, there's other dudes that I can play music with. I don't have to do it just by myself. This is awesome. You know what I mean? And it was funny too, because it's like a small liberal arts Christian school, and that was, I waited until I got to like a religious institution to like drink my first beer and have my first cigarette. You know what I mean? Like
totally. It's like
kiss my first girl. It was pretty hilarious, but I certainly wasn't alone in that. I think it was a lot of people discovering themselves, how they function socially, and it was very pleasant, man. It was a nice experience,
No, it's cool. I think you kind of hit on a key component that I think a lot of people, feel when they, even as an adult, where it's like you're introduced to certain situations where you don't feel the ability to plug in. And I think you kind of skirted around that word, but like, you didn't feel like you could insert yourself into anything in high school that would either make you feel comfortable or make sense. And I think that's obviously why a lot of people gravitate towards a particular like music scene or whatever. But obviously, since you were, like you said, just I don't mean to paint the picture of you, like you said, playing in front of your mirror.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, man. Have a day.
Right. But just that notion of like, you couldn't plug in. So you're just like, well, I'll just do this thing on my own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. It was a very kind of like isolated experience, and it was was nice. But
did you find yourself like, because of that sort of isolation? Like, did you feel very I guess introspective, or like were you to kind of
just for sure? But that came natural. I mean, I've always been a super introspective person. I've always kind of been that guy who looks like they have too much on their mind, and maybe it pisses some people off, or maybe some people like think it's fine. That's always just sort of, I don't want to call it a burden, but I mean, from day one, that's kind of always been, I guess, like my general demeanor, and that's always just sort of what's come natural. So yeah, I think pretty much.
Got it. And so were you born and raised in the sort of Massachusetts area? Where did you come up?
I was born in Denver, and my parents met at Colorado State University. My mom, born and raised in the Rockies. My dad was from Florida, and they met up there in Fort Collins and lived there till I was 3. And my father's sister at the time was suffering from cancer, so my parents moved out to Massachusetts for, it was supposed to be kind of temporary. And she held on a little bit longer than they were expecting, and by the time she eventually passed, we had sort of established some roots here, and they decided to just stick it out here. So I was probably, like maybe 4.5 when my folks sort of pulled the trigger on Massachusetts and were just like, let's do it. I mean, I would go back to Colorado a couple times every year, see my mom's family, sort of spread my wings a little bit. But I would say that I'm a New Englander through and through at this point,
Right. No turning back now.
Yeah.
And so what was your family structure like? I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, your mother and father. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had 3 younger sisters. My sister Tally is 18 months younger than I, and then I have a sister Kate and a younger sister JoJo. All of whom are 6 foot tall. I'm 6'7". My father's 6'9". So yeah, it runs in the family for sure.
I mean, I've seen you guys play before. I think I can't remember exactly when I saw you guys, but you played one year at the Fest, if I'm not mistaken, in Gainesville.
Yeah, man, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, but I got that you were tall, but it didn't register 6'7". I mean, that's like you're not. I mean, you obviously have to play basketball. Like that's kind of what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I grew up doing. 100%, man. Like I was all about basketball. My dad was sort of like my little personal coach, and just every summer I just spent 3 months of summer at basketball camps all over New England, just sort of at Dartmouth or Holy Cross or whatever. And that was the thing, and I'll never forget it. And like, I guess, well, I mean, I probably won't forward this podcast to my parents, I guess.
It's okay. We can speak freely. No, nothing.
Yeah, cool. I remember the moment, perfectly well in high school, where I think it was my freshman year, and I had just tried out for the basketball team, and I made the team, and I was pretty stoked. And I went downtown to our pretty small town that I grew up in, and after school you'd go down to the candy store and people would hang out and you'd just chill, whatever, and I would be sitting around kind of awkward. And I remember some of my friends, these folks I knew, ripped out a big, massive joint, right? And they lit it up and they were like, Jamieson wouldn't touch this, man. Jamieson's a wimp, blah, blah, blah. So I went over and I just ripped it out of their hands and I just took a puff and I started coughing, of course. And then someone put on Led Zeppelin 4 and I was like, I quit basketball. I want to be a musician. Literally, that's almost exactly how it went. I remember the moment like it was yesterday.
Right.
I took a giant rip of this, huge joint, like the width of someone's pinky, and next thing I know, someone's playing When the Levee Breaks, and it all just sort of coalesced and came together, and I was like, this is awesome, man. This is great.
Right.
And then
the devil's lettuce took hold.
Exactly. Yeah, well said. Well said, man. So then the basketball ship sailed,
right?
And it was sort of music or bust from there on out. Not necessarily marijuana, but music or bust for sure. So
right. Yeah, this was leading you down a road to black tar heroin.
Yeah, it's a gateway drug, right? So
totally.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So that you, obviously you diverted your path, and what. At that point, how was music kind of a part of your life? Because obviously, usually you have music around with your parents and everything like that. But it sounds it sounds like Led Zeppelin was such a pivotal.
That was sort of the seminal moment. I mean, I grew up for sure. Both my parents lovers of music. I mean, my mother is a very, very fine violinist. She put the violin down when she had kids for a little while, but she picks it up from time to time. And her mother, my grandma, had perfect pitch, taught music. Like, she was just a musical sensei. And I have recordings of her playing the piano that I still listen to. And, my dad, it was the kind of thing where, like, growing up when I was little, on a Saturday night, my dad would put on a record and he'd rep out, like, the video camera, and we'd all do, like, fake, routines to whatever rock record he had kicking around. And I think I was kind of lucky, because I was raised in a religious household that was kind of a little more on the evangelical side of Christianity, where it's, like, a really, heart, spirit, emotional thing. Mm-hmm. Which usually sort of follows suit with a lot of more dogma and a lot of rules and a lot of, like, you can't do this, you can't listen to rock music, that's of the devil and all this shit. And my parents were, like, actually pretty cool about all that stuff. So there was always music around, and it was always encouraged to sort of be, like, self-expressive, and it wasn't, like, nearly as burdening or I guess strict as a lot of the people. Like, when I went to college, of course, I'd hear horror stories of people who parents made them burn the records, and they had to have, like, a prayer intercession for anyone that was listening to Bob Dylan or whatever. And, like, mm-hmm. I lucked out that I didn't get that into the stick, so.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because, I've definitely had people that have come on this show before that are speaking from the point of, there'd have to be the lyric check when music is brought home and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's interesting that you're self-described, obviously, the sort of evangelical tip. It's usually, like you said, it's very cloistered and you're sectioned off from the world, but obviously
exactly.
That was your experience, which is pretty, that's a rare experience.
Yeah, I'm really thankful. My parents are great people, and they're really intelligent, and they're very, well-considered folks. At the same time, they're also, very emotional, and they've got a beating heart in there that's always on display. So I was lucky to not get strapped with that insular classic, anything that's not of the Lord is evil thing. Right. I was sort of allowed to pick for myself. I mean, growing up, it was just sort of, you want to come to church? I'm like, no, all right, you don't have to. There was no overbearing overlord type thing with it. So it was nice. Of course, I wasn't allowed to just run off the rails and go insane, and I didn't. Luckily, like, that never befell me, but.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like which I think many people strive to live their lives. It sounds like there was a balance. It sounds like it didn't swing in one direction or another, which is awesome. And so then obviously, like you said, you have that inflection point freshman year where you kind of go off, where it's just like, oh, music was your thing. It's like, did the notion of, like, playing in a band, was that the identifying purpose, or was it just simply the self-expression you felt as you were, looking at yourself in the mirror and figuring out Led Zeppelin songs?
I think it was a little bit more of the latter. It was definitely, for me, kind of a eureka moment where it was just like, oh, I found it. And it was like the light bulb went off in the head and everything. And I think a lot of it was based around the ability, one of the, probably the most amazing thing about music to me is its ability to sort of communicate and clarify the things that are on your mind. I think the art forms that anyone is attracted to, they usually gravitate towards the one that they feel most comfortable expressing the things that they're thinking and using it as sort of an instrument to do that with. And music was just the thing. I started to learn the guitar, and I was able to sort of help clarify how I was feeling about girls, or how I was feeling about, New England seasons, or, family life, or what have you, whatever it may be. It was just a very natural manifestation, I guess, of all of those, like, kind of things that I've always had on my mind for as long as I can remember. And it definitely was just like, hand in the glove type thing. So
sure, it was.
I didn't really picture being in a band so much. That sort of started happening in college, like I said, when I sort of drifted away from the insular thing and met folks who were also into music, and met drummers and bass players and saxophonists and whoever. And then that was where the sort of collective unit thing presented itself to me. But for in the formative days, it was very much, like I said earlier, it was more of an isolated experience. And I'm always grateful for that, because it started out as like my own thing, like a private thing, and I'm sure it'll kind of metamorphosize back into that when I get older. And right now, of course, I'm at the apex of band life and trying to make this happen with, a bunch of other people with sort of differing perspectives, but we also have like a shared love of music and of each other, and it's quite the adventure, But when I think back to the early days and the I don't know, just being drawn to music and what it was about that. In college, I studied philosophy, and I've always really enjoyed that, and I've always really. I don't think I'm certainly not an intellectual, but I think there was a little phase where I was into that, and I've always sort of been governed by, like, I guess, animal instinct more. Like, I'm a very instinctual person, and there was something about that sort of bedrock foundation of who I am that music really just connected to immediately. And I think one of the things that rock and roll does is it just fires up that part of you. It really just inflames, like, the sort of animalistic side of the human condition, or people's tendencies, I guess.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let me tell you, the holidays are awesome. They've got some great moments, whether it's spending time with friends and family, gift giving, all of the things. I personally love Christmas lights. Like, I can't wait to put them up. It just makes me feel warm inside. But there are moments where it's like, man, it's overwhelming, or I'm feeling really alone or sad. All of the things that just, can kind of compound it during the holidays. That is why you need to take a beat and maybe take that moment for yourself. Give the gift of time to yourself. And that's honestly why I love dipping into therapy. That's why I also love working with BetterHelp, because they make finding a therapist online so dang easy. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Like I said, it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, and then you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Please, in this season of giving, give to yourself as well with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Ray for 10% off your first month. Take care of yourself, please.
This episode is brought to you by Toyota. We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing, and once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, with more on the way. But we also know a BEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concerns about finding a charging station when you need it. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future, in vehicles and in manufacturing plants too in the years ahead. The materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you. A hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/beyond zero. Toyota, let's go places.
Hello there, this is Malcolm Gladwell, host of Revisionist History. eBay Motors is here for the ride. You saw the potential. Through some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love, you transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive entirely its own. Look to your left, look to your right. No one's got a ride like this. There's nothing else that sounds like, feels like, or looks like the set of wheels in your garage. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly, so there's no limit to how far you can take it. Brake kits, turbochargers, engines, exhaust kits, roof racks, LED headlights, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Hello, hello, hello. I will be getting back to the conversation with Phil, but I must break in and let you know that the podcast today is sponsored by Zevia. Now you're like, what is Zevia? Like I think I've heard of it. Maybe I've seen the name about, but I'm letting you in on some amazing stuff here. So Zevia is a 0-calorie, naturally sweetened soda. There's 15 different flavors to choose from. My personal favorite is black cherry. Just dive into that one first and you'll be like, oh, Ray, this is the elixir of the gods. Thank you so much for putting this past my lips. And you're welcome. So visit Zevia.com/flavors and you can see the, like I said, 15 of these things. Like you'll be able to drink whatever you want to taste like, maybe something like that. Anyways, I also encourage you to visit Zevia.com/podcast. So that's Zevia.com/podcast. And there are amazing things going on here. Like I said, 0 calories, no sugar, no artificial sweeteners, no caramel color. There's no GMOs in there, and you can find it anywhere. So go to any grocery store, natural food store, or go to Amazon.com and you can find it there. And you order it and ships it directly to you. So visit the Zevia.com/podcast link because they are giving away some cases. So if you visit that and sign up, there's a good chance that you may get a case of soda on your doorstep. And it was exciting for me because this is a product that I personally have drank many, many times before, but I just didn't drink it for a few years. And so then because they started to show an interest in the podcast and come on as a sponsor, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get back in the saddle. I'm gonna check it out again. And what was I missing? I was missing a lot. I actually told my mom, I was like, hey, Mom, it's great. Like, remember that product you showed me like 5 or 6 years ago? I mean, I didn't say product, but I said soda. You remember that thing you showed me, 5, 6 years ago? She's like, yeah. And then I was like, they're taking it out in the podcast. It's awesome. And she was like, why did you stop drinking it? And I was like, you know what? That's my fault. I'm encouraging you to not make the same mistake that I did and stop drinking this stuff. So, yes, visit Zevia.com/podcast. That's Zevia.com/podcast and just enjoy. You will be able to thank me much later and be like, Ray, you got me onto that stuff. I appreciate that. One more thing, and then we'll dive back into the conversation with Phil. But I'm so excited about this sponsor as well. Title Fight and Anti-Records. You remember Title Fight, Ned. I had Ned on, who is the vocalist, bassist of the band. I don't know, this is maybe 2 years or so ago, but I've loved the band for quite some time. But Hyperview is their newest release, and let me tell you, it's a doozy. I love the record. It's if you like stuff that not only sounds good, but is guitar-based, you will like it. So it's like, if you're into punk, you'll like it. If you're into like shoegaze, you'll like it. I promise that there is something for everybody in this record, which sounds crazy, but it's absolutely true. My personal 2 favorite songs are Chlorine and Rose of Sharon. Those are what I got going on. Other people freaked out about the record, like Stereo Gum loved it, and they've been touring relentlessly over the past year. They've been touring with their friends' bands, which I just love everything that this band does because it's very deliberate. Like I said, they tour with their friends' bands. They're not like, oh, like we got to tour with, this band because they're going to get us more fans. They just do what they want. They're on their own program, and I love it. So please check out Hyperview on any streaming service or iTunes, and because their touring schedule is kind of calming down now because obviously they got to go back in the studio, get another record going. I'm sure their creative juices are at an all-time high, or maybe they just need a little break. But regardless, you can get Hyperview now on iTunes or any of your streaming preference platforms. So please do that. And thank you very much, Title Fight, and thank you very much, Anti-Records. I think a lot of the people that are creating music when they are in that sort of, really volatile time of obviously high school where you're developing your own identity, you hardly know who you are, but at the same time, you're also projecting this version of yourself out to a lot of people. But where you and obviously the other members formed Caspian was obviously at a place where you guys were, a little more mature, for lack of a better term. Like you had some life experience behind you. And so I think because of that to me, that speaks of why, because I mean, in almost every interview, and honestly, I'm typically when I'm doing research for these interviews is usually, I'm able to find 10 or so interviews. Like you do everything. There are so many interviews that you do that kind of blows my mind. Because
we're trying to sort of parse it out a little bit more for this record. I mean, I guess I'm a founding member, and Joe and I have sort of been the one constant, like, in the band. Like, you know, obviously Chris passed away, and he was a founding member, but Cal and I basically started the band. But of course, you know, Cal, like, touring just kind of wasn't his thing. Like, everyone sort of romanticizes tour and thinks that it's this wonderful, amazing experience, and it definitely is, but it's definitely not for everyone. And it was just the kind of thing that Cal was never really super into. So when he dipped out of touring, then we got Aaron, and it's been like a really amazing rotating cast of characters. But I think, you know, from day one, Joe and I have sort of been, we've played every show together, we've written every song together, like, we've been there from day one, and Joe just, quite frankly, doesn't really dig doing interviews. It's just not his style. And most interviews sort of circle back on, like, the, you know, the history of the band and what we've been through and how it started and how we're developing and all that. And I think when it comes down to it, I just kind of have to be like the go-to person for that, you know? So yeah. I guess I think that's why. And I'm also just the tallest, and I stand in the middle of the stage. So.
Right, by default.
Yeah, by fact.
Right, by default, you kind of go there. But I think that, anyways, the point I was trying to make was the fact that so many people allude to the fact, like, oh my gosh, you guys have been a band for so long. But I think the age in which you formed, not so much in, like, the year, but just, like, the fact that you guys were a little bit older, gives you, like you said, a more solid foundation to kind of continue and not be this, you know, really volatile thing that most high school bands are, you know?
Right. Yeah. It wasn't like we weren't in, like, the tempestuous sort of mode of our life. It was definitely, we had all been in bands, and it was definitely the moment in which it was like, okay, like, are we going to keep doing music here as individuals? Is this going to be like what we're going to commit ourselves to, or are we going to kind of pivot into adulthood, and, you know, try to get homes and have kids and get married and all that stuff? And the way the first 2 or 3 years of the band went, it was just sort of patently obvious, all of us involved, that, like, this is something that we really wanted to chase down. So yeah, it was definitely at that moment where it was, I don't want to over dramatize it, but, you know, it was that crossroads sort of thing where it was like, all right, like, what do I really want to do with my life here? It's time to start sort of figuring that out. And like you said, I think we've certainly grown up a lot in the last 11 years, in a multitude of ways. But yeah, if that kind of experience had happened in high school or something, when it was just like 3 sheets to the wind, let's fucking do it, man. Like, that would be I think it probably would have combusted by now, for sure, you know?
Yeah, no, for
without
sure.
a doubt.
Totally. Yeah. You have to coordinate so much, but, so like, what was your, did you have kind of a trajectory in your head, you know, kind of removing yourself from, obviously, starting a band and doing all that sort of stuff? Like you said, you were very introspective, philosophical. Was it one of those things you had another sort of quote unquote career path in mind, or did you have any?
Not really. I never did. In the back of my mind, I always wanted to kind of be a history teacher for high school, and it's not like I kept entertaining that or stoking the fire even when the embers went low for it. I mean, it was always in my mind around that time, but I never had, like, a chosen career path. I mean, my father's he's a really brilliant, like, entrepreneur, CEO, kind of like business, you know. He's really good at, like, he had a couple businesses, and I felt like maybe if I just sort of gave myself over to that, I could maybe accomplish that, and do that, just because it's how I was weaned and how I was raised, and that's sort of where I'm coming from. But there was never anything that really got me excited, that I can point to. Sure. in that sort of realm of the world.
What was your? Yeah, no, it totally makes sense, because you essentially, most people spend their high school and college years just, you know, quote unquote, figuring out what they want to do.
Exactly.
And so you just try to find a voice. But so what sort of, you know, entrepreneurial stuff was your father into? Like, was he?
Well, no, my dad got started in the mid '80s, like at the sort of computer boom. So he was doing computer software stuff. And this is when he did backup shit. So basically, you know, before the cloud and before, you know, computers have morphed into what they are now, these big companies would require like just huge, almost like football field sized supercomputers to back up all their data and all of their information, and all that stuff had to get stored and it had to be protected so that in case the place burned down or whatever, that stuff was safe. And his company sort of, they invented something called TapeSys, which was something for VAX systems, which is like really archaic, like old computer stuff. And yeah, he cut his teeth on that. And he was the president of his company called Software Partners for maybe 20, 25 years. Had its ups and downs. Eventually he sold it off at the end and was going to retire. And my dad's the kind of guy that, when he's reading the newspaper, he's got his glasses down low, or he's reading the, I don't know, the like Life magazine or Time or whatever. If he sees a grammatical error, he sort of like cancels his subscription immediately and like pipes up and gets really like, pissed off and bent out of shape about like poor grammar. That's always been one of his little quirks. And one day we were like, you should do something with this. He's like, well, I think I'm just going to retire here. And he went out and started a company called proofreadnow.com, which is kind of a cool company. And it's weird talking about this because I feel like I'm being a salesman for it. And I also
you see the value in it.
I do. And like, I also like my day job, I guess, for 13 years, has been working for that company. So my dad is, like I said, he's supportive of what we're doing. He was one of those classic people that when I showed him Caspian, he just was like, where's the singer? Like, this isn't going to get on the radio. Are you on drugs? What's going on here? Like, This is some really weird shit. Because he's coming from the school of the Beatles and, sort of classic rock. And now, of course, like, he came to every show to support and check it out. And it's hilarious. Like, in 2005, he just had no idea what we were doing. He knew that I was serious about it, and this wasn't just like a sex, drugs, rock and roll thing. Like, I wanted to do this seriously, and I wanted to approach it with the same kind of valor and, acumen, I guess, that someone would bring to a business. He would come to the shows, and now, he went to our show at the Sinclair on Friday night, and of course just gives me like these massive metaphors of like, the last song started as this small seed, and then it grew into a tree, and then it was a person. And it's like, it's been really amazing to watch him come around and understand this stuff. Yeah. Especially like in the midst of him throwing me work. So I do sort of like administrative stuff for that company, and it's a really cool business model. And this is not sales pitch time, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, you go to the website, you have any kind of document, you upload it to the server, it gets sent out, like 500 emails get sent out to 500 different proofreaders. The first two people to get the email and look at the document, proofread it from their house, they send it back, you get the job back in an hour. And it's proofread by, professionals who have been tested and all this stuff. And it's really smart because, my dad, he just moved up to a farm with my mom and my sister and her kids. And he can run the whole thing from his cell phone pretty much. So
it's amazing.
It's really, dude, it's actually pretty amazing. Yeah, it's like...
Yeah, well, no, I could see. Honestly, I can hear removing the sort of, whatever self-awareness, doubt inside your head that you're talking about this. It's great because obviously people can, there's a service being provided. It's obviously valuable. It comes from a very genuine place. Like you said, your dad is making these very sweeping changes in his life based on the grammatical errors of magazines and whatever. So it's
he's passionate about it. He's as passionate about proofreading documents as I am, writing a song or something.
Well, I think it's you hit on something interesting there that I wanted to pull on as well, where because usually parents and them grappling with the idea of their sons and daughters playing in bands that they don't understand, like that is a tale as old as time. But it's funny because usually it's on kind of the opposite side of where you were coming from, where your kid starts a punk or hardcore or whatever, something that's very abrasive and very loud,
a little more subversive, and totally
yeah. But or just more aggressive, and so they parents will immediately look at that and be like, oh, why is my son or daughter yelling in a thing? Like, this is weird. But then you are coming at it from like, it's this very, nuanced and subtle thing that obviously builds on it. And like, clearly, even you probably your most basic listener, the complaint that they could have towards a band like yours is like, oh, it just puts me to sleep. But they're not going to
Right. Which we take as the highest compliment possible. But yeah.
Totally. But it's just funny that your father had to, or both your parents, I'm imagining, had to reckon with the idea of just like, yeah, what, I don't even know. Like, yeah, there's no vocals. Like, there's just weird stuff going on. I don't even know where to put this in my head.
Yeah, exactly. You can't compartmentalize it. You don't know how to approach it. It's just this sort of like obtuse thing that you're like, what is going on here? And to, like I said, if, and this has sort of been one of the inspirations, is like, if someone like my father can come around and get this, and like, it actually has, now it's at the point where it has deep emotional impact, and within his soul, then it's like, well, man, I mean, if he can come around to this, then anyone can come around to this. So I got to keep doing this, because there's more people out there who would approach this with sort of like the same guarded, like, this doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, I guess I'm viewing him a bit as a specimen in that regard, which I don't want to do, but it's like, it applies for sure. And
sure.
It's been really beautiful to see, and it's really encouraging. And anytime I meet someone that doesn't quite get it, like, I don't write them off immediately. Like, there's hope for them.
No, totally. Yeah, you're just like, this isn't some complete lost cause.
This episode is brought to you by Toyota. We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing, and once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, with more on the way. But we also know a BEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concerns about finding a charging station when you need it. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future, in vehicles and in manufacturing plants too in the years ahead. The materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you. A hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/beyond zero. Toyota, let's go places.
Hello there, this is Malcolm Gladwell, host of Revisionist History. eBay Motors is here for the ride. You saw the potential. Through some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love, you transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive entirely its own. Look to your left, look to your right. No one's got a ride like this. There's nothing else that sounds like, feels like, or looks like the set of wheels in your garage. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly, so there's no limit to how far you can take it. Brake kits, turbochargers, engines, exhaust kits, roof racks, LED headlights, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
When you get a new car or a new home, your first reaction might be to say things like, "Oh yeah," or "I can't believe it," or "Booyah." But what you really want to say is the one thing that can get you the help you need. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. State Farm is there with coverage you need for your car, your home, and even boats, motorcycles, RVs, and other things that matter to you. With a State Farm agent, you know someone is there to help you choose the coverage you need. With so many coverage options, it feels good knowing you can find what fits for you. And when you need ways to get help, State Farm gives you options there too. In person or on the phone, with your local agent, or on statefarm.com, or their award-winning app. State Farm lets you do things your way. So, when you need help protecting the things that matter most, remember to say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
So because obviously, like as I mean, the band has changed. I wouldn't say drastically, but obviously you guys have evolved each record, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm sure, obviously, the first couple of years, especially just because the style of music that you play wasn't exactly commonplace within the independent music scene. Like people had maybe an inkling of it, but it wasn't. It wasn't commonly known. So how long did it take for you to kind of at least see the audience at least begin to understand what it was that you guys are doing? Because I'm sure the first couple of years they were just like, what the fuck is this?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, to be quite honest, I mean, when we started this band in 2003 and we didn't play a show for a year. We had a practice space and we'd get together a couple nights a week and we'd just hang out and we'd play music and we'd just screw around and jam forever and just have a good time with the four of us. So we didn't have a band name. We didn't really want to play shows. We didn't want to go on tour. We didn't want to record anything. We just were like, just so enamored with this way of communicating, like music. It felt so natural, all of us, and we were just completely thrilled. So when we did play our first show in this neck of the woods, it was August 2004. We all had that post-college social friend scene, so everyone brought their friends together, and we packed out our local bar, and we played this kind of strange, instrumental, dramatic music, and it clicked with all of these disparate groups of people that we were friends with that came out to that show. I mean, after that concert, they were all like, it was kind of an immediate thing with them. Like, it wasn't a slow burn. And these were all people that were, listening to whatever styles of indie rock at the time. So they were well versed in music, but they hadn't really heard anything like this. And for them, it was kind of this, at that first show, it was this immediate thing. Like, I'm very critical. I'm just that kind of person. And after the show, I was like, oh, I could have done this better, or I could have played that, whatever. And everyone came up to me and they were just like, you guys need to keep doing this. Like, I've never heard anything like this before. This is really special. You guys have a good chemistry. I don't know what to call this kind of music. And I was just, of course, like, oh, this is post-rock. And people were like, that's a stupid word. Anyway, like, and it was really almost immediate. And then we did a show a month later, and there were twice the amount of people there. They wanted to see this strange music that no one had ever, around this neck of the woods, had ever heard before. And, it just kind of caught fire. And I think I'm glad that we took that year to sort of fine-tune what we were doing. We certainly weren't perfect at the time, but I mean, we had an established vision when we started this up, and I think people gravitated towards that. They sensed some kind of unification amongst the four of us. And then it was just sort of off to the races. And then, of course, when we got out of Beverly and we got out of Boston and started to go on tour, and you're playing for 6 people, or a bartender in Nashville or Tucson, Arizona or something, that's when you feel like, that's when, okay, not everyone's going to get this. Not everyone's going to be knocked out the first time they hear this. That's where, like, the slow burn element sort of comes into play with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what we were committed to. Like, we were like, we're going to stay the course. Our first few tours are probably going to be real shitty, but we're going to make some really cool friends in the process. We're going to have an experience like none other, and we're just going to keep doing it. And, we were committed to doing that, and we did. And, you'd come back and you'd play for the same bartender with maybe 20 people instead of 6. And they were like, thanks for giving me a free copy of your record at that last show. I actually listened to it, and I'm starting to get it. And it was pretty cool to watch people sort of blossom in that way. You know?
No, it's interesting because it sounds like you, I think a lot of bands, especially these days, not saying like, not trying to go down the nostalgia path, but getting this sort of that local boost, where that confidence that you have, where it's just like, oh wow, like maybe we are onto something that people are identifying with, like. Yep. Because if you guys didn't have that initially, it might have been harder for you to, take those next confident steps as opposed to
stay the course. Yeah, totally, man.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, it's good that you had that experience because, ultimately, it obviously got you guys out to where you're at now.
Yeah, those formative, like, I don't know, first 2 or 3 months of us playing around here, like preaching to the choir, because these are supportive people who are our friends and wanted to see us succeed, but like to see them like that, I've actually never really thought about it this way. So you're helping me kind of internally clarify some things, which is really great, and I really appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, without that at the inception of this, it may have been a very different thing. Like it's not like we played our first few shows to, crickets. There was like a supportive group of people present, and I think that just immediately, it's like we bought a new car and tank was on empty, and those first few like formative things just like filled it up full, and then like we'd drain it on tour, and then we'd come home, and then our friends would fill it back up again, and then we'd go out and drain it and such and so forth. But yeah, I mean, never have taken for granted that early support that we got from the people around here, but it's nice to be reminded. So thanks for reminding me of that, man.
Yeah, no problem. We both provide each other with a service.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And so due to the nature of your guys' music, obviously, there is a large proliferation of this style of music that can obviously be placed in pretty much any circumstance, from movies to sports, video games, whatever. I'm sure you guys have had sort of limited placement in regards to that, because I'm not going to pretend that I've heard you guys' song on like Monday Night Football or anything. Not like I watch football, but I have. Still, the point being taken. But I'm sure you guys have had these really sort of weird, mind-blowing experiences of, wow, our music is being used in this weird way. Do you have any sort of like anecdotes of like, wow, I didn't expect our song to be used as a bed of music in this thing?
Yeah, I mean, we, let's see, one of the first we got screwed in the Olympics, let's put it that way. So there was some feature, this was back in 2007 or 8, the 2008 Olympics, and they were doing some feature on like a ski jumper or whatever, and they went to his hometown, and all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, like our music just like popped up, and I was watching this live, I was sort of one eye on the floor, one eye on the TV, not really paying attention, and I was like, that sounds familiar. Then I got, of course, a million text messages that was like, they're playing your music on NBC, and that was like a shock, and it was great. Of course, we didn't get a dime from it. NBC cited some like ephemeral usage thing or something, but that came out of nowhere, and that was like, okay, well, we're on someone's radar. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. HBO used, I think, Moksha for like a Mayweather Marquez thing in like 2009. That was really great. No one's really used our music for anything super bizarre or strange. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like we've been on like a tampon commercial or something like that. Like
totally.
It's always been most all of the time, except for that first time. It's all been really above boards and gone through the proper channels.
Right. No, it's still cool. It's just, it's always, I just always find it interesting when bands that either sound like you or obviously can be placed, they're very versatile. It's just always interesting because whatever, you can obviously cite Explosions in the Sky and Friday Night Lights being like, that would never make sense. Like a rapid action football movie and instrumental music, like what? But so I just always find it
worked so well because of the indigenous element of that.
It's true,
like the Texas thing and like the sort of the way that film was done. I mean, like on paper it would just sort of be like, I'm not really seeing this, but that was one of those magical, it all came together perfectly type scenarios, which is very rare. But I think that you can attribute, the majority of their success to that sort of, not a happy accident, because obviously it wasn't an accident, but for sure.
No, definitely. It seems like obviously because of what you guys have all obviously put into your band and sort of dedicated, essentially how prolific you've been with, regular releases, and you guys are active from a touring perspective. You guys have obviously built your life centered around the fact that you could play in a band. Like, you all obviously have jobs in which you can leave and come back and do all this.
Yeah.
I presume that was a very deliberate decision at some point along the way. Walk me through
in terms of like the day jobs and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like
yeah, for sure. I mean, Joe has been working at the same Starbucks. He's been there for 12 years. They promoted him to shift manager a couple months ago, which he deserved and was great. But he's got allegiance to that spot. Aaron's a professional guitar teacher, so he's got his sort of pack of students that he can call the shots and say, I'm going to be gone for a couple months. Here's a guy you might like, and I'll be back this day. Yanni is just sort of doing freelance stuff. Johnny is doing carpentry, so he's just sort of getting jobs when he can take them. And, it's like when we're home working, it's like you kind of camel up and you stockpile up like as much as you possibly can. And I think it's given everyone like a sense of work ethic in sort of an indirect way that's really great. Because when you're home, it's like you got to make the most of it, and you got to really hustle, and you got to pay the bills, and you got to have an understanding of where you fit into whatever sort of job you're doing. And I think it's sort of like developed some really good traits with everybody in terms, like I said, just in terms of the work ethic. But not a lot of it's changed. No one's really bounced from place to place and then started working somewhere, and then they said you're going on tour, you're fired, and then they come back and find a new job. It's all been pretty steady.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Which is great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's like an ideal situation, because I always find it. Excuse me. Sorry. I always find it interesting because I think there is this weird disconnect. Like, granted, I'm going to use an example that's going to seem bizarre, but I'll walk you through it. So, like a person like Eddie Murphy, where obviously it's like he's one of the most brilliant comedians of all time, and obviously he hasn't done stand up in years and years and years because I think there's people that say like obviously he's afraid. Clearly he's a bajillionaire. What could he complain about? Because all of his early comedy is obviously directly from his experience growing up on the streets, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like I think there's a notion that can be connected to bands where it's like once you're given the opportunity to live off your band and have that be the sole income, and then you're not attached to anything real back at home besides just like waiting for the next tour, there is that weird sort of disconnect that people start to feel where they're not even participating in quote unquote real life, because obviously touring isn't real life. So
right,
I'm sure you guys have obviously, like you said, I think it's developed a work ethic.
It's developed a work ethic, and it's something that sort of kept us grounded, because there's those times, like you can probably well imagine, where you come home from tour and you've been separated from. So yeah, like normal life, tour is, I think, very accurately, like you said, it's not real life in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you have to work and you have to get up and do your thing, and you can't sleep all day. But yeah, it's not real life in any way, shape, or form. And to come back to those sort of fixed, steady, entrenched in the real world experiences like work or relationships or whatever, I mean, I think they definitely, like we said earlier, it speaks to the balance, and that's very healthy. Yeah, and I think it's been really good for us. I mean, that said, of course, we would love to get to a point where we could do our music exclusively and we could just be able to focus on, I think we're the kind of people that if we were given that opportunity, I don't think we'd squander it, and we'd go down a black hole of emptiness and despair and alcoholism and drug use and just sort of fucking ourselves up.
Well, especially because you've obviously, I mean, at this point, because you've been doing it for so long, like you would be able to plug into that scenario relatively easily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those experiences have engendered a sort of sense of responsibility that's like really important to us, and I think we'll be grateful for those if Lord, if we're ever able to get to that point where this can sustain us. I think we'll be thankful for the grind that we have to put ourselves back into in a different way after tour. 100%.
No, definitely. There's two last things I want to hit on before I let you go.
Helping us see the brighter side. I like that.
Well, but I mean, it takes there takes a certain discipline to because obviously, like you mentioned earlier, where people on the outside that experience bands and tours coming through, it's like that's all entertainment, and they view the relationship with your band or your artistry as it's very transactional. Like no one puts any thought into it. People just think like, oh yeah, dude, like it's so rad you showed up for tour and cool. But then it's like when you pull back the veneer and realize it's like, oh my gosh, like this is touring is hard. It's not
every single day, same thing. Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of hurry up and wait for like 45 minutes of playing.
Yeah, exactly, man. Have you been on tour before? It sounds like you understand it very well.
Yeah, I do. I toured for years with.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, with a bunch of hardcore bands I played in for a while. So yeah, no, I identify with that. But the conceit of what it is you're going for, because you have existed for so long, and you're just like, well, this is like, there's really no other way around this. Like we're doing this because we obviously like to do it, and we're dedicated to this, and everything else is kind of just like noise around it.
It's periphery, yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah. Because you guys have obviously not sort of attached yourself or attributed yourself to one particular scene, like we were joking around, where it's like you're all the band members came from such varying backgrounds. Is it one of those things, like, do you guys kind of like look at both sides of the coin, and like at times do you wish you were like, man, I wish we were aligned with one scene because we may have more people into us? And then
never,
like,
no, hell no.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, and that's the thing, is like trying to shed the post-rock thing has been even kind of difficult for us. And we do it with varying degrees of success, and sometimes we fall flat on our face discussing it, and sometimes we articulate it well. But yeah, I mean, the foundational principle, and I think one of the things that attracted us to this style of music way back when, it's like, maybe it's naive, maybe I should know better at this point after doing it for 11 years, but I mean, I still do feel like this kind of music is for anyone that likes music. I mean, you could like heavy music, soft music, plaintive, emotional stuff, really hooky, immediate, candy-coated, whatever. I think I've always felt like this style of music does lend itself to sort of like just a broader, non-genre, prescriptive type thing, and that's always been like really central to what we do. It hasn't necessarily governed the creative process. When it comes to creative process, we just try to write songs that we would want to listen to and that we would enjoy. But in terms of like associating ourselves and like drawing, planting our flag in one kind of music and then hurting from that scene is just never. That's just not the kind of people we are, I guess. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's like a smart move, and I totally get why people do it. People long for a sense of association, and I think that at the end of the day, some people do prefer that definition. That is like, okay, like, you're a punk rock kid, like you're a post rock dude, like you are a top 40, flavor of the month type thing. And I think people welcome that sense of self-definition, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but it's just, that's not the kind of folks that we are. Like we want as many possible people to hear our music. Like, I don't know, I think, where was it? It was in like San Francisco. We did this show a couple weeks ago, and so this really nice club, it was totally sold out, which was great, and it made us all stoked, and we were high-fiving, and we're like, it's about time we sold out a show here, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then we walk out, and you look at the audience, and it's like, there's a 68-year-old, like, grandma with purple hair, like, slowly, daintily sipping, like, a glass of, like, pink wine or something, and then right in front of her is, like, just, like, Avril Lavigne, like, punk rock chick, straight up, probably, like, 17 years old. And then there's all shapes and sizes. And like when we look out and we walk around the crowd and we see that, to us, that makes us feel like we're on the right path. Like we're accomplishing the goal. Like there's no code at this stuff. It's just like, you like music, you like the band, come into the door. Like you're not going to get judged on like how worn out your jeans are, or like, if you have the right kind of fucking pomade or something in your hair. Like, right. It's just for people that just like music. And that's always been our MO. And we've stuck to our guns on that. And I think that's one of the reasons why the post-rock thing has been so kind of, we bristle at the term, is because that's that definition. That's something that sort of quarantines you into this one area of music that you're not allowed to escape, and you have to play by the rules. And there's a dogma attached to it, and you got to like preach to that choir. And, I think we could go out and write a record of 9 or 10, 12-minute songs that start really mellow and get really heavy and crescendo and get epic, which, our stuff crescendos for sure. But like, we could go out and write like a prototypical post-rock record, prove our allegiance to that scene, and there would probably be 100 or 200 people more at every show. Mm-hmm. But that's never been interesting to us, I guess. It's just not, that's not why we got into it. And
right, that's not your goal. That's not what you're striving for.
It's not, yeah. We're sticking to our guns. And like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I know people that have their allegiance to the straight edge stuff and whatever sort of scene of music that they're into. And there's that affiliation, and that's great. It's just not us,
Yeah, no, for sure. The last thing I want to hit on was because usually I hate to bring up things that obviously every other person brings up in interviews, but I noticed that it's like almost everybody is just so confounded by the fact that it's like, why are you instrumental? Like, did you accidentally choose that? Like, it's one of those things that I just like, I mean, honestly, it's like, here we are in 2015, like, and people are still kind of like asking you that question. Like, did you guys mean to not have a singer? And I don't know. It just blows my mind where it's like, I don't know. I mean, granted, you and I are people who have been, very close to music for a long time, but I just, so this is a little pet theory that I have where, because I
bring it on, man.
Yeah. I think people, especially from the interviewing context, that kind of put that notion out there, don't like, the only reason they ask that question are the fact that they don't have any sort of thematical things to pull from in regards to, lyrical content, whatever it is that a band is trying to express from just the sheer, expression of words in whatever it is that they're doing. So I just think that that's why people have that reflexive moment where it's just like, oh crap, I can't look at lyrics to be like, hey, what does this song mean or whatever.
Exactly. I've lost my point of reference here. Like I don't even know how to approach this because it's so familiar. Is that sort of what you're going for? Like
totally. That's like that. That's the notion that's your entry point to music, or that's your entry point to a band. So I'm sure it's one of those things where you're just like, I can't even answer the question of like, why are we instrumental anymore?
I have the utmost respect. I mean, 98% of the music I listen to, rock-wise, is, there's a singer, there's lyrics, there's a vocalist. And, I mean, it's kind of a dummy answer, but I think part of it is, like, that's just not what we're good at. Like, you have to have a skill set to be able to articulate what you feel lyrically. That's not easy. I mean, there's people that try and do really, they're terrible at it. But then there's also, your Leonard Cohens and your Nick Caves and your Bob Dylans who just do it really well. And like, that's not part of our skill set. We've just never been good at it. And I think acknowledging that and just saying like, that's just not our thing has been like this nice little easy out, because then we don't have to play ball by that stuff. Like we can just do whatever we want. And it's like, okay, like that's just not what we're good at. So, and I guess thankfully, by the laws of fucking post-rock, like we don't have to do that. Wonderful. So it's not this like, vocals are evil and lyrics suck. It's like, if you're going to do it, they have to be pretty good. And like, I was in a band before Caspian. It's called Holly Sawyer Rifle Company. We never really got out of Boston. We didn't really try. The singer in that band was a good friend of mine, and he was a really great lyricist. Like, he just wrote these unfucking believable lyrics. I don't know where they came from. He had that skill. He had that ability. Mm-hmm. And when we were starting this band, it was like, none of us really have that ability. So let's not try to pretend that we do by incorporating lyrics just because you're supposed to, and that kind of fits into the, we're comfortable expressing ourselves instrumentally. We've always felt from day one, like I was saying earlier, we have things on our minds. We want to get them across. That's the purpose of art, and we're accomplishing that with these songs. And I'm able to express how I feel about a litany of things with this kind of music that doesn't involve vocals. So I mean, it's kind of like a, side of the same coin thing, but like, yeah, that's never been like what we're good at. And I think we're really comfortable expressing ourselves this way. And it just feels right. It feels natural,
Yeah, no, for sure. It's actually something that I've been kind of coming to grips with myself over the past couple of years in regards to like live music. I'll use a very recent example. Like this past weekend, I saw Sufjan Stevens play.
Oh wow!
And he I've enjoyed his music for a long time, but I'm at this weird spot where it's like artists of a certain ilk that are whatever, it can be broadly classified as like indie rock. They're not. When I say they, like the collective they, they don't need to be engaging in the sense of like, because I self-identify as a punk and hardcore kid, and like shows to me are obviously a visceral experience. It's like whatever, mosh pit, circle pit, sing-alongs, and so here's me obviously having to reckon with the idea of watching a band like literally get up there in front of me and perform without any artifice. Like they don't have to toss their guitars around or do anything like that. So it's like I realized that it's like, okay, I can't watch a band of that nature that's again, I'll kind of get another example where it's like I watched that band Wild Nothing. It was about maybe a year and a half ago. They played the Glass House in Pomona, which I know is a venue you're familiar with.
Definitely.
And, they just got up there and just played. Like there was no There's nothing.
No pomp.
Totally. And honestly, it was like watching paint dry. I was like, if I wanted to listen to the record, I would listen to the record. And I wanted a little something more out of that. But anyways, going back to Sufjan, where it's like beautiful production, like, cool, like great lights, like everything added to this overall vibe and experience. And I think that that's essentially what you are obviously just hitting on right there, where it's like when people come to see Caspian, you want to leave people with this emotional resonance that isn't just like simply watching people get up there and play. Because I mean, you guys, to be clear, like you guys are actually pretty active, and I feel like are engaging live. It's not just like you're getting up there and going through the motions or whatever.
Right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's always, once again, that we just sort of, that's how we perform our music. I mean, all our bands prior, even if it's Cal's chill folk stuff or whatever, like we're all kind of freaking out on stage. We have this kinetic energy, and we brought that to Caspian, and it's staying with Caspian. Like that's just how we move, and that's what we do. This tour was cool because we were really able to kind of up the production and do some light stuff that was really dope. Like we got a guy out with us that was sort of helping us sort of explore. It's like we know we can get on stage and headbang and sweat and go crazy and feel the music, and it's like a very physically present experience when you see us, but we kind of wanted to just not rely on that exclusively, and then we wrote this coordinated light show into it, and it was like, I feel like it was a step in the right direction. So we definitely want to start getting into like a production that, involves us doing what we do naturally, which is moving around and being really physically active, but also like getting some like visual element in there. And I don't mean like videos of someone snowboarding to like epic post-rock music or like,
right.
You know what I mean? Or like real trippy psychedelic stuff. But like, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's someone like Sufjan Stevens, like they're telling a story. We're all trying to tell stories here with our music, but I mean, lyrically, vocally, I think just his presence, his demeanor, just what he's communicating lyrically speaks for itself. And he doesn't need to do a whole lot, He's got that amazing. I saw him at the Wang Center here in Boston, and I was just floored by that show. I mean, I was knocked out. Like it did kind of feel next level to me, but also with that softer kind of music, which is the kind of music that I listen to in my spare time. There's a sense of reverence with that stuff too, and I think that that the stage presence that he has or his musicians have really lend themselves really, really well to that sort of the more reverent atmosphere. And everything he did. I mean, the backdrop looked like a church cathedral or something, right? Mm-hmm. Like the way the visuals were set up, and
for sure.
There's a unified story there, and I think that's really impressive.
Totally, and the fact too, where it's like I feel like you have to reach a certain level in order to be able to, you have to be playing 2,000 capacity theaters in order to like reach this level where it's like your stage show can be engaging. You can still tell the same story. You haven't lost any of that emotional resonance, and it was. I agree. It's very powerful, but
that's what we're going for. I mean, my dream is it's not to play stadiums. It's not to do basketball arenas. It's like the 1,500, 2,000 cap thing where you can just create an experience for people. That's kind of what we're gunning for, and I don't know. I mean, we're getting a little closer to that, but it's once again a slow burn, So
no, that's incredible. Well, Phil, I really, really appreciate you hanging out, and I'm glad we went in so many different directions. I love this.
Yeah, man, I thank you so much for not ripping out the stock questions, and I really just kind of felt like I was sitting at a bar talking to a buddy, and that's very rare in an interview, and I really sincerely appreciate it, dude. Thank you. You got a great vibe, and your questions are really thoughtful, and you're a very well-spoken person, dude. So I really appreciate being involved in this, man. 100%.
You're making me blush, Phil. I appreciate that. Okie dokie. I think that was a little too much of the me watching the Fargo television series trying to creep in there. Okie dokie there. Trying to do a horrible Minnesotan, North Dakotian accent. But that was Phil. I hope you, like I said, just check out Caspian. Hopefully this conversation will kind of spur you on to do so. But just a great band, and I really am happy with the their trajectory of their career. Like, when you watch a band, you're just like, hey, you're doing it. You're doing the thing. You play to 100 people, you're playing to 150 people, and then it's like now you're playing to 400 to 500 people, and it's awesome. Because it's not like their music is playing the radio. So, anyways, big thanks to Phil. Big thanks to Mark, the manager, who hooked us up in the first place. And, yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. So, our producer, as always, is Tom Richfield. And he is in a band called Hindsights. So, Google Hindsights UK, and you can maybe see some tour dates of him. And like I said, if you see him out and about, just be like, hey, Tom, like what you do with the show. Because that's all he needs to hear. Visit the show's website, 100wordspodcast.com. And you can also email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. So I'm about to do some more interviews for the show, so I must depart. But until next week, please be safe, everybody. And for those of you that live in America, happy Thanksgiving. Because, it's the day before Thanksgiving. So, maybe don't kill a turkey. Maybe, eat some veggies or something like that. There's my political message. Hopefully that filters through to the, 10 people who still stay on to listen to this outro. But, maybe be a little compassionate. Don't kill as many things today. So, happy Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you next week.
You've been listening to the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, jabberjawmedia.com. Shh.
This episode is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota is a leader when it comes to electrified vehicles. Today, battery EVs make up less than 10% of new vehicles sold because of higher cost and concerns about range and charging. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future. With an electrified, diversified lineup of hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery EVs, Toyota empowers you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint. Learn more and get details at toyota.com/beyond0. Toyota, let's go places.
You're probably getting your holiday list ready. Tree? Check. Presents? Check. And of course, Coquito made with Goya. A delicious creamy coconut holiday drink that will transport you to the tropics. Sand, ocean, sunglasses? Check. Friends and family? Check. Share the joy with Coquito made with Goya coconut milk and cream of coconut. Find the recipe at Goya.com. Goya Coquito, a tropical way to holiday.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.